memories of New York was to me the best convention, but it was we had all this energy that was going on. We also had to deal with the issue of people who were standing for re-election who didn't get re-elected that year. And that was like the saddest memory of the '86 convention. And I remember one board member who was not re-elected felt that I was personally responsible for his not being elected. And so, yeah.
What else do you remember about that convention, or the first few that you attended?
So many memories. '84, I remember just kind of being like a deer in the headlights. There was just so much to take in. I remember being very, very tired at the end of that convention. It was just exhausting. Flying in at 6, I remember landing at 6 a.m. to Atlanta to receive the rail and some other folks, and being in meetings up until 5 o'clock. And of course, John Bush was, so you didn't leave a John Bush meeting, even the one that he was thinking was treasurer at the time. And so you went on, you got the work done, and then you took a 20-minute lunch, but you worked. Because our job as a house adults was to work. It was not to party and play. And then you had the playtime. There was these great social meetings. People like Bob Doyle, who was one of the true gentlemen of the organization in Atlanta, just being a very, very friendly spirit. Meeting Jerry Mallon, these legends, and having wonderful conversation with Jerry Mallon. '85 convention, I remember, because we moved to LA, my home chapter, we were planning the convention, and I remember a couple of things. My friend Jeanette just reminded me yesterday that I was the poster boy for the '85 convention, me and my then partner Michael Emanuelson. So these little cards that we mailed out all around the country to entice people to come to Los Angeles. It was right after the city of West Hollywood became incorporated, and so we had people like Steve Schulte, who was a city councilman, and then Valerie Torino, who was the first openly lesbian mayor of any city in the United States, addressed the convention. I remember the discussion in '85 about whether the bathhouses should be closed. And I remember Ivy Bettini, who is a legend in lesbian, gay, Democratic politics in Los Angeles, and she gave us an impassioned plea about how she was afraid that we were going to lose 1/3 of our gay brothers to AIDS if we did not do it. And I remember Tom Horan being just incensed that anyone would, and this actually swayed the debate for me, incensed that anyone would make that comment, and the fact that it's part of an anti-sex campaign, for lack of a better word, that people, whenever stuff hits the fan, people always come and say, just don't have sex. The interesting thing about that, which I took away, that I wish that our team would have been right in the sense that we've only lost 1/3 of gay men. Because if you look at those pictures from '85, we lost far more than 1/3 of gay men, obviously off in the bathhouses. But I remember saying that there was a real fear, and there was, in '85, there may have been 4,000 people across the country. But I remember the passion which Tom said, we're talking about 4,000 or 5,000 people, these arguments always come, don't buy the argument, and that really swayed me. But I said, yeah, don't buy the scare tactics. And of course,
did you rethink that later, or did you just feel that there were other ways of approaching the problem?
I think that there are always, I do, as I've gotten older, I've rethought this whole free sex and all that kinds of stuff. I think bathhouses can be a valuable place to give HIV information. I think especially, you can't, police behavior. If I had to take the vote again, I would still go, for a resolution keeping bathhouses open. Most of the people I know who have HIV or AIDS didn't get a bathhouse. The other highlight, though, was from that convention was seeing Bayard Rustin, who was the keynote speaker. And just a powerful force of nature, I guess. It's the only way to describe Bayard Rustin. But to see this legendary figure give, I think, the definitive keynote address in the organization's history. I don't even recall what he said so much as to aid the delivery and the power of it that it had on me at that time. And then one moment, and then being the most flirtatious thing in the elevator. So you saw this, larger-than-life figure 1 minute, and the next minute he's, being the seditious thing, on the block. And it was to see people, when they're on in performance mode, and to see someone when they are like, hey, what's going on? It's just, it's like one thing I'm grateful for BWMT. It's like, through BWMT, I got to meet Baird Rustin. That's a true hero. There's not that many heroes around these days.
What do you remember most? Well, let me go back to '85. What's your recollection, if any, and I'm sure you have some of the infamous flag incident?
That was powerful too. Yeah, 85 and 86 had to go down as two great conventions. In the 85 convention, Atlanta decided to host, I think it was Atlanta, to host a reception. And either in the reception or in the doors, actually in the reception, they had the Confederate flag. And
which was the state flag.
The state flag of Georgia. I was not there. I heard John Peterson walk in and said, that has to come down. And I could definitely see John Peterson walking into a room and telling me, you got to take that off. And the people from Atlanta were very offended that this was a sense of pride for their chapter. And it all seemed to hit the next day or later that day at the Black Caucus. The salient memory for that was, after some long discussion, James Friedel, in a most sincere moment, he got on his hands and his knees, and he was, with tears in his eyes, and said that he sees his grandmother when he sees that flag. And he was not only offended, but it was a painful scar. It's something that that has been joked about many, many times since then, but I remember the sight of seeing James on his knees with the tears in his eyes talking about his grandmother. There was almost nothing that could be done with that moment. I mean, it spoke. And I think some of the divisions which happened perhaps the year before in Atlanta, between having John Bush as the last one run for co-chair, and then the next year, and then having James Friedel talk about his grandmother and how hurt that this organization would sponsor a Confederate flag, and then having James Friedel as a co-chair set up some divisions. Actually, no, it didn't set up some divisions, but exposed some very clear divisions within the organization, which persisted for a good 10 years afterwards.
Well, let's go back. I'm going to ask you later about all the other conventions you've been to, but and I want to get over to Regis here shortly. But at some point you left Los Angeles. Is that right?
I left Los Angeles in '88. I moved to Newark, New Jersey, with James Friedel, we weren't partners, but to go to Rutgers University, and I quickly joined the New York chapter, which had been which in the mid-'80s, New York seemed to be having just this epicenter of information or activity for the NA. Mm-hmm. And I was quite thrilled to be.
That was '88.
That was '88.
And New York had, by that time, changed its name.
All together.
And I guess I should have maybe asked you first about that issue, the name change issue, which of course came to a head at the Milwaukee convention. Yeah. You want to talk about that? And
I remember my last thought of that was last year's convention, and someone was talking about all the two conventions, and with no disrespect to anyone from Milwaukee, but someone was talking about all the good that had Milwaukee. I turned to someone, I said, hi, they listened to another convention. That Milwaukee convention was many things. Good, it was good from a entertainment and maybe a program. That was the most bitter convention that I have experienced. They must have had a different Milwaukee experience than I had, and the person I spoke to said, that's right, it was a very bitter convention. But the name change debate was the discussion that had been brewing for a couple of years, as I recall. I want to say that in '85 there was discussion about name change. And New York was the first chapter to embrace the name change. I remember being part of some debate when I was on the steering committee in Los Angeles about the name change. And Steve Jarrell silenced me one time on this debate about, and New York said this, and New York did this, and it was one of those great humbling lessons. And Steve said, well, that's different here, but this is Los Angeles. And it was like a woo, put me in my place good, in terms of good tactics.
Well, how did you see the issues in the name change debate?
To me, it always seemed to be that an organization which was dedicated to eradicating racism would be a more effective doing that as men of all colors together. If the core of what we are about is looking at racial and lesbian and gay communities, it's always in the name black and white men together, what's lacking various elements. And although the organization can say we've had, and people use the argument, well, we had Michael Fu, we had some other people who were in the organization, who were prominent in the organization, who were not black or who were or white. The organization, for the most part, has always been black and white. I think in terms of even our ability to address issues of race in the gay community, to some degree, has been stymied to a degree by the name. It's always, I mean, it comes up every year. It came up earlier this morning in other conventions where the black men are questioned as to where their real loyalties lie, as are white men's organization. But an organization which is really about men of all colors together fighting racism would send a different dynamic. And so I was definitely in the pro-MACT mode.
And you have continued with that position, right? You haven't, like some of us, you haven't changed your mind.
No, I still believe that if an organization is truly dedicated to fighting racism, Black White Men Together is a really good name. I think the organization itself has done wonders. I think that, yeah, I was going to read what I just said, so, or he's long-winded, so I'll just stop.
So what was your experience, what was your involvement in the New York chapter? How long were you there? What type of activities did you get involved in?
When I first was in the New York chapter, I was young enough to be in YMACT, which was Young Men of All Colors Together. And now I'd be CH, Chicken Hop, I tried to go to that organization again. But I became involved. They used to have little discussions on Saturdays at the center. And I'd go to the Neil Pace and Avril Young, and I would be very much just enamored with them both. And going to those rap discussions. I also went to the larger MACT rap discussions. I never held a position in MACT New York. I never was on their board of directors. But I was always I was there.
And then at some point, you relocated to San Francisco.
I relocated to San Francisco to work for the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention, which I had volunteered for in the context of being a volunteer task force. And then when Phil Wilson left, there was an opening. They redid his position, and I applied for that job and moved to San Francisco.
Now, at that time, the task force was still under the National Association?
Under the, yes.
And what job did you have there?
I was initially the coordinator of education and training, and that was actually, I remember my cover letter. I thought I was uniquely positioned to have that job. I was a coordinator of an AIDS program in Newark, New Jersey. I had great knowledge of BWMT as a board member, and have traveled to many of the chapters in the organization. So I thought, hey, I can do my AIDS education. I'd work with the task force. And I've done program coordination. So my very first thing with the task force was to actually do a comprehensive needs assessment as to what each chapter was doing in terms of HIV and AIDS, and to assess what type of work I'd be doing for the next year or so. And that was a really great learning experience. It was also quite fun. I got to do, I think my strengths were, I got to come and say, hey Doug, this is Gavin. And we had this long questionnaire, and so we set up some time to ask you my, dozen or so questions, which took a half hour to 45 minutes. And
this was the chapter needs assessment.
The chapter needs assessment for the task force to assess what each organization was doing in terms of their response to HIV and AIDS. And and then based upon that, set up a work plan to conduct workshops or trainings for different chapters.
So what type of programs did you set up and do?
We did, our main thing was the Hot, Horny, and Healthy workshop, which Phil Wilson developed. I tinkered with it a little bit, and we developed this training to help facilitate, a training program for facilitators so that they could lead those workshops, as well as develop other workshops. We also created a couple of workshops. One was called I Do, which was not a marriage workshop, but it was, at that time, the big issue was people relapsing, quote unquote, into unsafe sex practices. So I do recommit to safer sex. There was a discussion, a workshop that we worked on called Prevention, What Will Make Me Do It? And so we get facilitators and develop this 2-day curriculum for would-be facilitators. And we took that on the road. Later, we were active in getting local, not chapters so much, but local organizations, sometimes there were chapters, funding to do more HIV/AIDS work.
So how long did you work for the task force?
A long time, from 1991 till 7 years, a little more than 7 years.
And during that time, the chapter detached from the NA, right?
Right. After 2 years that I'd been there, Reggie Williams had called for though Reggie felt that the task force needed a board of directors who was 100% committed to HIV/AIDS, who understood HIV/AIDS, understood kind of the policy dynamics, and I think Chicago Convention, as I recall, in '93, the task force officially separated from NABWMT.
And what was your view of that separation, that whole process?
It was something I thought was needed, actually. It was something that I felt very comfortable in my role with the task force and BWMT. But in terms of looking at the larger picture of HIV within the country, especially looking at communities of color, I thought it was a necessary adjustment. Part of the deal that was brokered when we separated was that the task force would still provide technical assistance to the chapters, and I know we did that until Mara Solis Maris became the CEO of the task force. So we would always provide ongoing support, but it really did allow the task force to do things that I think we'd be unable to do with NABWMT. We created a whole policy piece so we could actually really do some advocacy work for gay men of color. If you look at the CDC announcement, for instance, one just came by recently, but they had used the term gay men of color. And so the federal government actually recognizes gay men of color. The funny thing is that if the CDC does something that is not directed to gay men of color, but Black and Latino or Asian communities, they are minorities. But the CDC officially recognizes gay men of color, that if you're not gay, then you're a minority. But that was due to some of the work of the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention. The fact that up until the recent Bush administration, we had directly funded CBOs who were giving money from the CDC to directly go to
CBOs,
community-based organizations, community-based organizations of color, primarily Black and Latino, but as well as Asian and Indian, Native American, that those organizations were directly funded, I think, through the policy work that was done by the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention. We also have programs that were developed from people of color, POCAN, People of Color AIDS Network in Seattle, to a group called POCA, I think it was in Tampa, which we had to Project Fire in New Jersey, which were directly funded because of the assistance that was given by the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention. And so I think when you look at the response that communities have to HIV or AIDS today, particularly in terms of communities of color, a lot of organizations got their roots out of the work that was begun through the task force. Whether they were members of the volunteer task force, maybe they've gone on to be EDs and policy people, where they did a training, they took that training to create their own HIV program from Bobasi in Chicago. There were a lot of organizations today, which have their roots in the task force. And I don't think that would have been as successful or would have been done in just that way had the separation not occurred.
So did you work for the task force until it ended, or did you
I was
leave?
there a minute or two before it ended. God, real painful memory. But it became very ugly at the end, and an unhealthy place. It's really quite sad. Seeing Reggie's baby become so unhealthy. Reggie was, well, last time I saw Reggie in San Francisco, he came back and he was saying, this place needs to burn. He was very clear, the task force needs to end. It becomes something quite unhealthy, something she didn't trust anymore.
What, you care to elaborate on that?
Well, there's a whole different...
Well, I mean, briefly, without...
I'm sorry. Briefly. The leadership of the task force changed dramatically with Mario Solis Medic becoming CEO as opposed to executive director. And Mario, I think, is a great policy person. And he decided to take the task force into this big policy arena, as opposed to doing some of the basic prevention work that we were required to do. That caused one schism. Mario's personality was such that he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and so there was some debt that he paid. But there were the task force also generated a reservoir of goodwill across the country, which is good as long as you have, and so a lot of the issues, the debt issue and some infrastructure issues were forgiven because people trusted the leadership of the task force. They trusted Reggie Williams, they trusted Randy Miller. Mario didn't generate that reservoir of trust, and so you then had people who actually started to change and come for the task force, who wanted to attack the task force. And there are people internal to the task force who could no longer, myself included, could no longer say this was the place to be. Al McCord, who moved to San Francisco with me to work with the task force, we were kind of the old guard, and Al and I, in many ways, bonded again by kind of processing, what was our role in the task force, and should we actually, is this the time to get out? And within literally days of each other, we both gave notice to the task force and said it was time. And I think we were the last people to get full paychecks from the task force, I think a month and a half later, after not paying their staff for a month and a half or two. Mario Solis, under cover of night, left the task force.
And that was in 98?
That was in 98.
Well, now, when you moved, you said you moved back to San Francisco in 91.
Mm-hmm.
You've been there ever since?
No, I moved in when I left the task force. I was offered a position at Project Fire, being the coordinator of Project Fire, and I moved back to the safe arms of Mother Credo, and
which is and Project Fire is an anti-AIDS.
An anti
in Newark?
Yes, in Newark, looking at gay men of color, particularly among the house community in Newark. And so I coordinated that program for a year and a half before I realized that as much as I love James and many things, I am a truly California kid at heart.
So you've been essentially, except for that brief time, you've been back in San Francisco, and have you been involved in the chapter there? Yes,
I'm currently the co-chair of the chapter.
How was that? I mean, that chapter's had a fairly storied history, especially in its relation to the NA. How did you view that? Where were you in that fight, and what was it about, if it was a fight?
I was not involved with the chapter at that time. So yeah, I mean, I've just recently become involved with MACT as an active member. My perception, if I have not had these conversations with two of the principal people,
who were
the co-chair at the time. I'm not going to name names.
Well, you can, I mean,
but Richard and Gary. Okay, Richard and
Gary. It
Gary.
was an open air dispute. I mean, there was no secret.
I mean, in some ways, they tap into the age-old issue, which has been going on for 20 years now that I can recall. What is the NA doing for me? People have this sense that this NA is supposed to make the impossible happen on a local level, and if I have problems in my chapter, the NA should be able to solve it, and if the NA cannot solve the issues that are going on in my chapter, what good is the NA? There are other issues, and why should I spend money giving to the NA? What was most distasteful to them, which was one of the things that has always been an attractive thing to the NA for me, is the black and white caucuses. It has always seen the silliest of silliest arguments. It is completely without merit to say that because we have together in our name that we must do everything together, and out of a whole 5 or 6 days of the week that we cannot spend 2 hours out of a week convention, that black men cannot converse with other black men, white men cannot converse with other white men, and because that is not together. It is such a stupid argument. I mean, it's one of my litmus tests on when I start seeing some of it. It's like how they feel about that, because the argument is such a silly argument.
Well, isn't there an underlying assumption there that racial differences are so unimportant that they can simply be ignored in
like
an organization that's bringing people together?
Silly, stupid. It just so and so like many chapters within the NA and many volunteer organizations, people are volunteers, and so if one volunteers to do something, you can do anything. You can I volunteer to do this, and all of a sudden you're a co-chair. One of the reasons why I like the competitiveness of elections of the mid-'80s was because just because you volunteered didn't mean that you were qualified. It didn't mean that you were thought highly of by anybody else. You had to earn, you had to demonstrate why you should be elected to a post, etc. That is not the case on many local levels. I've seen chapters where people have literally come in within 2 months and they've assumed they've said a couple of good things in the 2 months, they've become co-chair. It says a lot about the state of chapters, but it also means inherently is that you volunteer, you can be almost anything, unless you are so inept and so clearly evil or whatever, or you have some type of sex scandal, that someone will then say, well, because I don't want you to be it, I will run. But we have this, which is, I understand the whole idea of being nice and being a family and people, in some cases, assuming leadership roles. But the debate as to why who we want to be, I think, has been a victim of that. And all that to say is that in San Francisco, we had 2 people who volunteered to be co-chair and put in good work and did all that kind of stuff. What happens, though, if you have 2 people or co-chairs, they can, by virtue of that power, they can dictate tones and let someone says, well, no, you need, they're the co-chairs. And there's a lack of response to the co-chairs, and you can go in and say and do anything you want to say.
So they basically took the San Francisco chapter out of the NA, is that right?
Yeah, right. And that will not be the case by the end of the year. If we can get our checkbook, that would have not been the case as of the convention. But
you were now one of the officers?
I'm the board chair, yes. I'm the board chair. I'm the board chair at this moment, and we are going through we are having discussions because we have 3 board members who live in San Francisco. We have, and one board we don't know where he's living. He's in between houses. And we have people who also are members who live in Santa Cruz, and the people in Santa Cruz and San Jose have all gone through real catastrophic life changes this year, and so it's been difficult for us to meet for a while. So, but that will not stand. San Francisco will join the NA before the end of this year.
How large a chapter do you have right now?
We have a very, very small we have a very small group of people, like all chapters, who do the work. What we decided to do last year was to dispense with having a paid membership, and so people are affiliated with the chapter if they come to things, because now so much of the news can happen online. You really don't need people to